Sea level rise is one of the most defining challenges facing contemporary society. Over 60% of the world's population lives in coastal areas, and this includes the unceded territories of the Chamusquam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, commonly known as Vancouver, which is where we are recording. Today, I'm joined by Anwen Rees, who recently published an open access journal article called Unsettling Nature-Based Solutions, a pathway towards shifting colonial power relations in nature-based solutions, research, and practice. Anwen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Maybe to start off, why don't we just go through a basic definition of nature-based solutions, maybe for people who aren't so familiar with the term?
Yeah, so nature-based solutions are an umbrella term that means a lot of different things. That's usually what I say. So it includes like green infrastructure, conservation, ecological restoration, and there is a unilaterally agreed upon definition now that was released by the UN, I think last year, the year before, maybe 2022. It's something like there's so many similarities between definitions, but it's nature-based solutions are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems and give simultaneous human and biodiversity benefits. So it's like usually those elements are part of each definition, but yeah, the concept is really changing a lot over time. So it's starting to get a little bit more solidified now, but generally the emphasis and the focus is on that it provides these co-benefits, like the idea that it will benefit humans and nature.
Yeah, how was your process getting started? How did you come up with the framework? Or maybe do you want to explain what the framework is?
The framework, there's kind of, I guess, two components to the framework, but it's kind of a visual. So it's like a 3-step process. The first step is to commit. And then the second step is learn, reflect, and shift. And then the third is co-create, reflect, and shift. The second and the third step are kind of like an infinity symbol that just like goes on forever. So the idea is that it kind of visualizes a pattern of internal learning and self-reflection, and then taking that out with connection to a community and continuing that reflection on and continually changing how you're self-reflecting and learning and interacting with the community. And the idea is that it just goes on forever. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and then it also kind of visualizes the relationship and how important that is in your own internal self-reflection.
Who do you picture applying the framework, or did you have a specific population in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started based on what my curiosities were and figuring out where I fit into everything. So it is meant for Western or like Western educated or settler practitioners and researchers that are working in the nature-based solution space and are trying to better understand where they fit and don't want to participate in perpetuating colonialism, but maybe don't have the time or the tools to have the ability to reflect it and go deep into the literature. And so that's what I was seeing this as for myself, and just having the chance to really connect the dots between power and colonialism and what is happening in nature-based solutions right now.
I really appreciated how you used Harini Matunga's idea of the third space. Could you maybe explain your thoughts on incorporating that?
Yeah, the third space is this idea from a Maori planning scholar who talks about how it's a theoretical space where settler and Indigenous planning systems can meet and determine the way forward. And what I think is really cool about it is that it shows these planning systems to be distinct and that together they kind of create something new. So the special thing that I think about this framework is that it's not a Venn diagram, so it doesn't show them overlapping or integrating. It shows kind of two equal but different partners that are participating and creating something that works for both of them. And so I just really like the concept.
Did you notice any barriers or challenges that come up in Western academia or in the culture of contemporary scholars who don't have an Indigenous background? Are there certain things that like come up for you that inspired your work?
I mean, I feel like I have a few thoughts on this. The first one that we kind of talk about in the paper is that nature-based solutions is becoming more and more talked about, and a lot of the research comes from Europe, which is a very different context than what we have over here. And so it doesn't necessarily have the nuance or the understanding of like issues with implementation or conduct, which are things that is really, really important to think about here. There is talk about, nature-based solutions and justice, but thinking about justice in a European context is very different than thinking about, justice and reconciliation here. So that is one gap in nature-based solutions specifically. And there's a scholar, Graham Reed, he's an Anishinaabe scholar that talks about how there's just a general lack of Indigenous voices in nature-based solutions research. So that, is due to a lot of systemic barriers, and that is, a huge issue in academia in general that is due to a bunch of different things. Another thing that I was thinking about, I thought was interesting is one of the practices that we talk about in the paper is the need to uphold Indigenous scholars in writing. And when I initially wrote this paper, it was in APA format, so it had the names of authors after. And then when we submitted it to a journal, their citation format was in numbered form. And so I just like didn't think about it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just change to their format. And then all of the names of the scholars were erased after. And then I was defending my thesis, and I had the newly formatted paper, and the second reader on my defense, he is Tsimshian and Nuchanov scholar, and he pointed it out to me. His name's Dr. Cliff Atleo, and he was like, you talk about the need to uphold Indigenous authors, yet they're all in numbered citations. So then we had to go through and change them and have their names like actually in the text. So that was just an interesting, like weird thing that I hadn't considered.
It speaks to the depth of the system, the depth of the barriers. Like there's just so many things that kind of contradict, decolonization or anti-colonial like efforts.
Mm-hmm.
It was so nice to have this your paper on hand. I was speaking with a landscape architect who's doing some pretty cool research on like site-specific consultation with Indigenous representatives from the host nation on the site. And this paper, I think, was really helpful.
That's really good to hear. I mean, I feel like landscape architects are nature-based solutions practitioners too. So I'm glad that it would be helpful for someone else.